welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. I'd like to welcome back Andrew Johnson onto the show. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks very much for inviting me back.
Now then, last week we spoke about the moon and your contention that the Apollo missions did not land, and I made it clear that to me that's not the issue. The issue is that there is a secret space program which is way beyond rocket technology. So I think we've probably been there, but not necessarily with rockets. And I think that the argument over whether we landed with Apollo is a diversion, and it's a diversion from more than one thing.
Right.
I think it's a diversion from a secret space program, and possibly that there is stuff on the moon, and possibly has been there for a long time. Now, you presented a lot of your evidence as to why the Apollo missions, the evidence that couldn't really have got there using the technology that they allegedly used in those missions, and that we covered all of that last week. Now this week we're going to focus more on the astronauts, in particular the three astronauts who allegedly first went to the moon, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, and of course Neil Armstrong, who died very recently. Can you just give us a bit of background to the astronauts and what they've said?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things, isn't it? You know, if you actually start to listen to what the astronauts have actually said, some very strange things start to come into view. Mm-hmm. And you know, what Neil Armstrong has said, for example, I actually entitled my presentation after what Neil Armstrong said, mm-hmm. because he talks about there being great ideas, you know, to be discovered if you can remove one of the truth's protective layers. Mm-hmm. And he said that in 1994 during the 25th anniversary for the moon landing, you know, in the presence of Bill Clinton and Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin, and I think hopefully we're going to play that short clip. Yeah. And he starts off this speech as well with some remarks about a parrot. And you know, I think it's worth people listening to those, mm-hmm. because my you know, I'll say it plainly, my contention is that Neil Armstrong was, when he was talking about the parrot, was referring to Gus Grissom, because he talks about the parrot, you know, can talk but it doesn't fly very well, which is exactly what happened to Gus Grissom. You know, he talked but he didn't fly very well at all. In other words, they killed him. And also Neil Armstrong has been very guarded about certain things. And he's, you know, we've got this clip, I think we're going to show this other clip where Bart Sibrel confronts him with the Bible.
We'll come on to that later, but first we'll look at this clip. This was at the White House, and I think you said to me before that Armstrong had just got divorced around about this time.
Around about that time, yeah. I learned, and later he did an interview in 2005 with Ed Bradley, I think it was Ed Bradley, you know, said in the sort of background information that Armstrong had, his marriage of 38 years had broken up in 1994, which was the very year he made this speech at the anniversary. And you know, looking at his body language, you know, which is one thing I know you talk a lot about, Richard. You're much better at that than I am in reading it, I mean. And you look at his body language, and it looks like he's saying, "Look, I'm going to tell now. I'm fed up of, you know, keeping this secret. I'm going to tell as much as I can." Mm-hmm. And that's what Neil Armstrong said to me in that speech.
Right. Okay. Now let's just take a look at that then. I'll call that one up.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, members of Congress, fellow astronauts. Ladies and gentlemen, Wilbur Wright once noted that the only bird that could talk was the parrot, and he didn't fly very well.
So it didn't fly very well. Everyone's laughing there, Andrew. But you think Armstrong's referring to someone who was murdered, one of his colleagues?
I think he's referring to Grissom, yeah.
All right.
So I'll be brief. This week, America has been recalling the Apollo program and reliving the memories of those times in which so many of us here, colleagues here in the first rows, were immersed. Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.
Remove one of truth's protective layers. He's not talking about scientific discovery, but with that statement, is he?
I was surprised by that speech, because if he was talking about discoveries, he would say, you know, we've had recent advances in computer technology, we're now getting the internet developing. You know, he would have known about the early development of the internet, I'm sure, in the early 1990s, when the internet started to get going, and, you know, the World Wide Web was started and so on. You would have thought he would have spoken more in that sort of language, rather than truth's protective layers. I mean, protecting what exactly? And
let's just play the clip of the astronauts at the Apollo 11 press conference, where it clearly looks like they're uncomfortable with what they're being asked to do at the conference. They just returned from the moon a few weeks earlier, and it's their first sort of public airing. Just watch the body language in this clip.
It was our pleasure to have participated in one great adventure. It's an adventure that took place not just in the month of July, but rather one that took place in the last decade. We all here, and the people listening in today, had the opportunity to share that adventure over its developing and unfolding in the past months and years. It's our privilege today to share with you some of the details of that final month of July that was certainly the highlight for the three of us of that decade. We're going to divert a little bit from the format of past press conferences and talk about the things that interested us most, in particular the things that occurred on and about the moon. We will use a number of films and slides which most of you have already seen, and with the intent of pointing out some of the things that we observed on the spot, which may not be obvious to those of you who are looking at them here from the surface of Earth. Our memory of that actually differs little from the reports that you have all heard from those previous Saturn V flights. And
when you first stepped on the moon, did it strike you as you were stepping on a piece of the Earth, or sort of what your inner feelings were, whether you felt you were standing in a desert, or this was really another world, or how you felt at that point?
Well, there was no question in our minds where we were. We've been orbiting around the moon for quite a while. At the same time, we have experience.
What do you consider the most important piece of advice and recommendation that you will give the Apollo 12 crew before the takeoff for the moon in November, gentlemen?
I didn't hear the first part. The recommendations for 12 on which phase?
Will be the most important piece of advice or recommendation for the Apollo 12 crew.
I think we can say that overall we wouldn't change the plan that we used or the plane that they intended.
Will you recommend any changes in procedures for the moonwalking and exploration procedure? And did you find that your suits were mobile enough in view of the changes, or would you recommend further mobility features for them for operation on the moon?
Well, one gets used to the type mobility that your suit affords you.
Secondly, when you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
Many of us and many other people in many places have speculated on the meaning of this first landing on another body in space. Would each of you give us your estimate of what is the meaning of this to all of us?
Try that? Yeah, from you.
And of course, Andrew, these three guys all resigned shortly after they came back, which Neil Armstrong, I think, was going to be set up as NASA's spokesperson, this kind of thing, but quite a religious man, or very religious man, and the sort of man who I think Armstrong has strong principles. I think he's a highly reliable person. And I just think that he left because he was being asked to tell lies, possibly. What are your views on that?
Well, I mean, we could, again, we're speculating with the reason. We don't really know why he resigned. One could, one of the arguments that's just come into my mind, for example, is that they knew he was going to need to go on to do lots of interviews and lots of public appearances, which actually he didn't do that many of, but nevertheless, you could argue that that was going to take up so much of his life that he wouldn't be able to continue with the astronaut program because he was so famous. You could make that argument, but actually he didn't give that many interviews. In proportion to the sort of figure he was, he gave relatively few, and that's one of the things that people have pointed out. And why? But why would Aldrin resign? Why would Collins resign? Why didn't they become trainees for the next group of astronauts or something?
Right.
That would seem more logical, wouldn't it? But focusing on Collins, what he said at the press conference, which he'd shown the clip from, there's one thing we can highlight, and he said that in the press conference he distinctly says, because Armstrong is asked by Patrick Moore about seeing stars, in the solar corona, I think is what Patrick Moore's interested in. Could you see the corona around the sun? And Michael Collins says, I don't remember seeing any stars.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
So he's in the command module, we do not remember seeing any stars. Yet he writes in his book Carrying the Fire, on page 221 from 1974, this book, that he was on a Gemini 10 spacewalk. My God, the stars are everywhere, above me on all sides, even below me somewhat, down there next to that obscure horizon. The stars are bright and they are steady. Of course, I know that a star's twinkle is created by the atmosphere, and I have seen twinkleless stars before in a planetarium, but this is different. This is no simulation. This is the best view of the universe that a human ever had. So why...
That's Michael Collins.
That's Michael Collins speaking about his Gemini 10 trip, but according to the press conference with the Apollo mission, he says he didn't remember seeing any stars.
Okay.
I mean, this is one of the stories which does not add up.
Right. Now, another astronaut who is alleged to have walked on the moon is Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And you made some comments on a previous Richplanet show about Dr. Edgar Mitchell, which I think you received a few emails about.
Yeah, a couple of emails, that's right, when I said he was the sixth man never to walk on the moon.
Right.
We made a little joke about that. And my reason for saying that comes from this data, this evidence. Well,
what we're referring to here is alleged free energy devices, in particular one called the N machine, which was developed by Bruce De Palma. Bruce De Palma ended up dead, and he was visited by Dr. Edgar Mitchell. In what year would that be, Andrew, roughly?
It would probably be in the 80s, I think, sometime in the 80s. I don't know the exact year, but probably mid-80s, early 80s, something like that.
Well, let's just watch this clip.
Basically, he was visited by the Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who heard about his N machine, came to see it working, and then Edgar Mitchell made De Palma a paltry offer to buy out the machine, and De Palma says, no, I'm not, I wouldn't sell up for that. And then Mitchell said to him, Edgar Mitchell, the same Apollo 14 guy, said to
The sixth man on the moon,
the sixth
allegedly,
man to never walk on the moon.
Sorry?
Yeah, exactly, yes. The sixth man to not be on the moon, so he could be somewhere else at the same time.
So you don't think Mitchell walked on the moon?
No, he didn't. He didn't walk on the moon. That's a whole other story. But
right, okay.
Anyway, it depends how much of this you edit in or out.
Yeah.
But I'm just going into this.
So Mitchell, so a device using a similar principle to Trombley's, over Unity, allegedly called an N machine.
The N machine.
Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who we know as the Apollo 11 astronaut, not Apollo 11, Apollo 14, tries to buy his device.
Correct, or it makes him an offer. De Palma refuses, and then Edgar Mitchell says to De Palma, according to De Palma, if you're going to go around doing this sort of thing in California, you're going to get your head blown off, which of course De Palma said was a threat.
One of the pivotal people that I encountered early in my career was Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut.
Mitchell became extremely interested in De Palma's N machine. He made De Palma a paltry offer to buy out the invention, which De Palma naturally refused.
He said to me that if I ever tried anything on my own in California, I would get my head blown off.
And De Palma further, you know, and this is another topic I wanted to comment on, says that, you know, Mitchell then was at that time involved with the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and that is still going, IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, and Mitchell talks about that, and there's various other people involved with that. I know that Uri Geller has been involved with
Mitchell's very much into healing using electromagnetic fields and telepathy or consciousness, this
psychic
kind of thing.
Psychic
phenomena.
And that falls under the remit of this IONS research that he claims to be, you know, kind of involved with helping to get credibility for. And De Palma says that that's basically a CIA front, that those sorts of organisations like IONS are a CIA front to keep an eye on what people are doing, you know, who are coming up with these free energy devices, what sort of things they've developed, how they're planning to develop them. And that's what De Palma says in this clip. De Palma himself, he ended up dead in 1997.
So you think Dr. Edgar Mitchell is an operative then?
Of some kind.
Quite serious claims there about Dr. Edgar Mitchell, that he's not quite what he seems. Can you expand on that?
Well, I mean, one of the things which caught my attention was something which was on Richard Hoagland's site, the Enterprise mission, and that's a transcript of an interview that Mitchell did with Richard Hoagland, I think in 1996. It was actually, May the 15th, 1996. And Edgar Mitchell talked about people asking him what it felt like to walk on the moon. He said that people would ask him what he felt like to walk on the moon. And he said, I didn't think it was a germane question. And germane means relevant, so in other words, he didn't think, having a feeling of what it was like to walk on the moon, we didn't think it was relevant to talk about that. And then when he thought about that for a bit, he said, should I know what it felt like, should I know what I felt like on the moon? So I went to some good friends of mine, Dr. Jane Houston and her husband Bob Master, and said, help me find out what I felt like on the moon.
Right.
Why would you go to somebody to ask them to help you find out what you felt like when you walked on the moon? And I think he underwent hypnosis as part of this therapy, and then he said this was when his consciousness was, you know, expanded, and this is what spurred him on to form this IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which
Bruce De Palma claimed was a CIA front.
Correct.
Now, do you want to talk about Bart Sibrel now?
Yeah, Bart Sibrel. I mean, he's done a couple of great movies for people looking at this area, and I think the evidence in them is pretty compelling, almost, you know, all of it. And he made a movie called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. It's about 1 hour, 45 minutes, 55 minutes, that sort of time.
So he would approach some of the Apollo astronauts and he would challenge them.
Well, the first movie looked at some of the things we've looked at, and then he came across this footage where there's an apparent shot in the Apollo 11 capsule where they're in Earth orbit, and they're trying to make it look like they're a long way from the Earth, and they're showing the Earth at a distance, when in reality they're in low Earth orbit.
So this video is shot from inside the command module and it's looking at the Earth.
Correct.
But the astronauts are claiming to be filming it from the window, but they're actually filming it from the back of the
spacecraft. Yeah.
Some people have claimed that they had a cutout.
They had a cutout correct.
Right, to obscure the craft and to perhaps make the Earth into a crescent shape.
That's right.
The whole thing trying to make the Earth look further away than it was.
Correct. That's the object of the exercise, and you could see this where they take away the cover and they switch the lights on the capsule, so that the blackness of space, is no longer simulated.
And so Bart Zabrell, when he gets an interview with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, he shows
him that particular clip.
He shows him this clip, and at one point you can see somebody's arm, which is showing that the camera was not at the window, but it was further back in the craft.
Correct,
so
correct.
I don't know whether they were trying to make it look like the Earth was further away than the Moon or not. But what's interesting to me is when Bart Zabrell starts discussing this with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, it's what happens after that.
This is, what is this? Oh, this is a shot from 130,000 miles out. I guess it's from approaching. It's from approaching the Moon, looking back at the Earth. Now, I've seen this on a couple of flights. Was this something that you got? Although this is from Apollo 11, did you shoot a shot of the Earth like this? So you had a TV camera in the spacecraft.
That's correct.
And this is, I guess, the Earth zoomed in at a distance.
Yep, seems to be.
They get shot a little bit halfway to the Moon. Now it's kind of, I guess the cloud cover looks.
That's what you're looking at.
Now what is that right there?
What is what?
There's like an arm. It looks like hair on an arm getting in front of the window.
Maybe somebody got their arm in front of.
Now I thought that was the arm of God moving across the Earth. I couldn't quite figure that out.
I suspect that was the edge of the window, more than likely, that they were shooting at.
What did the Earth look like from a great distance? There it is again, 130,000 miles out.
About like that.
So it's pretty small at the distance of the Moon?
Yes, but I think the better images are the Hasselblad images that have been taken on every flight and are the most published pictures in the history of the world.
What is that in the top left? If that's the Earth, is that like another spacecraft?
No. That, I have no idea what that is. It's some aberration on the film of some sort. Oh, those are shadows, I think. Or reflections, probably reflections that are just reflecting.
Run that back again, so we get another shot of it.
If you're going to press me on this, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, because I won't pursue this. All of this attempt to say the Apollo programs were fake is just sheer nonsense. And you can talk till hell freezes over, and you're wrong. Okay.
Well, would you affirm?
I won't continue on this line. Okay, turn off the camera. Your interview is done. I've given you all the time I'm going to give you.
Okie dokie. Good to meet you.
I don't say it's a pleasure.
Understand.
Please get your ass out of my house.
Okay.
And you came here under false pretenses, and I think you're an asshole.
Well,
and if you continue this, and if you press us, I will personally take you to court.
I hope that you do. I invite you to. I'm going to give you my card so you can arrange that. And I'm encouraging you to arrange.
You're frankly not worth it.
No, we have you on the record saying you'll take me to court. I hope you do. Because we have proof that would prove it in a court of law that Apollo 11 didn't go to the Moon. And I think it's something that you should see it. I don't say that lightly, believe me. I don't say it lightly.
You're joking, sir. People can have fun. And maybe do that if they feel like they want to have a little fun on a trip to the Moon. And as an independent producer,
okay, we're heading out.
Doing that is against moral ethics.
Lying about going to the Moon is a satanic lie of gigantic proportions.
I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you get...
I'm heading out. I appreciate it.
And get the hell out of the Black House. You ever get a gun and shoot them at them before they get out of the office?
We have a video camera running if you want to do it.
Right.
Right, that would be great footage for us. See you later. In court, I hope.
Want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?